I traveled to the Far East this autumn at a time of great trial and conflict for the people of the Pacific Basin. I come to meet with the leaders of nations which share with us a common determination that the people of South Vietnam shall be permitted to shape their own destiny, free of aggression from without and free from terror from within. And on our agenda are the hard questions of war in all of its aspects, of force and of sacrifice, of diplomacy and negotiation, of rehabilitation and reconstruction. Behind the terrible costs of combat and hostility, I believe that a new Asia is gradually coming into its own. The process is slow, but the signs are unmistakable. I go to Asia with confidence and with hope.
On October 17, 1966, President Lyndon Johnson began the most extensive international tour of Asia ever undertaken by an American president. At Honolulu, as he approached the threshold of a six-nation swing through the Pacific Basin, many observers believed that he would find it hard not to touch down at a seventh, South Vietnam. At the heart of his trip was the Manila Summit Conference, a conference that would offer no miracles or spectacular end to the war in Vietnam, but would instead point toward a new era of unity and cooperation among the free peoples of Southeast Asia. For decades, the people of American Samoa had lived in a decaying area. Outsiders often called the port of Pago the shame of the South Seas. Then, during a 3-year period, using their own brand of self-help, as well as aid from Hawaii and the United States, the Samoans tackled the problems of poverty, disease, and education.
This island, with a population of only 22,000, has become the symbol of what many large nations may achieve for their people. They want to be independent and stand on their self-respect. They want to keep their dignity and to be proud of themselves and their heritage. They insist on equality.
Almost overnight, Samoa had doubled its per-acre yield of crops. It had sharply reduced disease and nearly eliminated childhood malnutrition. At the same time, the people of Samoa had also recognized that education was a tidal force, a key to survival in the 20th century.
Samoa has met this problem through educational television. It is truly a remarkable experiment. For what you're doing here is really a message of hope for millions of peoples elsewhere in the Pacific and in Asia.
rainy October 19th, President Johnson became the first American chief executive to ever receive the Kia Ora, the traditional welcome from the Vikings of the Sunrise, the Maori warriors of New Zealand.
I came here 10,000 miles a quarter of a century ago to join with your men to protect the liberty of this area of the world. I'm coming back this week to join with your Prime Minister and your leaders to try to search, to find a course and chart a way that we can again protect liberty and freedom. As the struggle continues, we are working with our allies to try to build the foundation of a new Vietnam. Fortunately, we are not alone. Asia is blessed with men and women whose determination is as strong as their country's needs. The key to Asian peace in coming generations is in Asians' hands. I rejoice that we have you as a partner in our effort to give them life.
For Mrs. Johnson, the sights and sounds of the Asian tour would eventually take on the quality of a blurred but pleasant montage, with its quieter moments, like those spent in Wellington's Begonia House, staying clearly etched in her mind's eye. If the Wellington reception had amazed the correspondents on the scene, it was the President's final stop before he left for Australia that surprised the New Zealanders themselves.
I am convinced that we have now reached a turning point in Asia's history, in Asia's relationship with the United States of America, in Asia's relations with all of the rest of the world in which we live. American policy toward Asia today must be the policy of an open mind. America can help. We must help. But we see our role as helping and not imposing our will on Asia. Asia will provide its own leadership. They will take their initiatives and they'll make their decisions, and they will time their own actions.
Just minutes before Air Force One landed in Canberra, a light rain stopped and a late afternoon sun made its way through disappearing thunderheads. For the people of Australia, this was the first time that demand from the White House had ever come their way. For President Johnson, this was to be his first visit since the days of his naval service in World War II.
I came to Australia in 1942 on a mission of war. And now tonight, more than 24 years later, I return on a mission of hope. I cannot say that miracles will occur at Manila. I carry no magic wands. The hard work of securing the peace is never done by miracles. Yet, there is new hope, a new vision in this vast area of the world. I believe there's a light at the end of what has been a long and lonely tunnel. I believe it for this reason. There is a widening community of people who are beginning to feel responsible for what is happening in Vietnam. This sense of common destiny is growing all along the arc of free Asia. The challenge of the new Asia comes to Australia at a conspicuous time in your history. You have already shown that your commitment is a matter of policy and action and not rhetoric.
While President Johnson and Prime Minister Harold Holt talked about the prospects of the Manila Conference, Mrs. Johnson took a boat tour of Lake Burley Griffin, a lake named for the American who had laid out the plans for what later became Canberra, Australia's capital city. Just before 4 o'clock on October 21st, President Johnson left Canberra for the Victorian city of Melbourne.
There's no song in the United States which says, "There is no place like home." Well, I want to change that. There's no place like home unless it is Australia. You have treated us as if we belong here, and I think we really do.
In Sydney, the welcomes at Canberra, Wellington, and Melbourne were eclipsed, as over 1,250,000 Australians lined the route of the presidential motorcade.
When I first came here a quarter of a century ago, I thought that I had not left home at all. I soon learned that the real similarities between us were far deeper and far more meaningful than landscapes and livestock. The real equation was human.
On Sunday morning, October 23rd, President Johnson came to the final stop of his Australian tour.
It is right that my second visit to Australia should conclude in a place that holds such vivid memories for me. Things are much more calm and much more peaceful here in Townsville today at the Buchanan Hotel than they were when I was here 24 years ago. I do not know how many Australian faces I have looked into or how many Australian hands I've shaken during the last 3.5 days. What matters is what your faces and your hands have said to me. The message is that the vast majority of the American and Australian people are together all the way on the battlefield and in the search for peace. Obviously, that view is not held by everyone. There are those who feel very deeply, and certainly those who feel very vocally, that our common engagement in Vietnam is morally wrong. Theirs is, I believe, the view of a minority. And we cannot and we must never insist that it speak its opinion in a whisper that is pleasing to us. And I will go to confer with the leaders of 6 nations. I will go to see and to listen and to learn and to act with our partners to bring an honorable peace to Southeast Asia at the first day that it is possible. We know all too well that this is a long road of many miles, but we will walk it shoulder to shoulder with free Asia.
With Air Force One's touchdown at Manila, Lyndon Johnson became the first American president to ever attend a multi-nation summit conference in Asia.
Today, the world has turned its eyes to Asia and begun to understand the goals and the problems and the energy of this region where almost 2/3 of humanity live. A new young generation of Asian leaders is determined that there shall be security and order and progress in their region. These are men who are prepared to stake their lives on that proposition.
On behalf of my people, therefore, I extend warm and affectionate welcome to each and every one of the heads of government and the heads of states who are here. I greet President Park Chung-hee of the Republic of Korea. I greet Prime Minister Thanom Kittikachorn of Thailand. I greet Chairman Nguyen Van Thieu of the Republic of Vietnam. I greet Prime Minister Nguyen Cao Ky of the Republic of Vietnam. I greet Prime Minister Harold Holt of Australia. I greet Prime Minister Keith Holyoke of New Zealand. And I greet President Lyndon B. Johnson of the United States of America.
From the very beginning of the Seven-Nation Summit Conference, President Johnson strove to reduce the dimensions of his American presidency. Despite all of the realities of American power that could be used to dictate or dominate such a meeting, it was clear by the end of the first day that Lyndon Johnson had come to Manila to act as an equal among equals.
How many years have you had? 10 years. 10 years? How long will it take? I think I get back right away. No. One day before.
While the leaders conferred, 5 of their ladies found a rapport of their own on a lawn overlooking the dormant Taal volcano and its quiet lake.
Where's the new crater?
The joint communique of the Manila Conference was signed at 4:30 p.m. on October 25th. It reasserted the Allies' determination to bring the war in Vietnam to an honorable conclusion. It also laid the groundwork for an eventual Asia-wide security grouping under the auspices of the United States. At its heart were 4 goals: peace, freedom from aggression, the conquest of hunger, illiteracy, and disease, and the building of a region of security with order and progress. Its most controversial section dealt with an Allied offer to withdraw their troops within 6 months if North Vietnam would evacuate its military and subversive forces from the south.
May God go with you, and may He crown all our efforts with continued success. It is my pleasure and honor to declare closed the Manila Summit Conference of 1966.
At the Manila Conference, we were deeply concerned with the military struggle in Vietnam, but we were equally concerned with the critical needs of the societies of Asia, whatever their ideology. So man's greatest problem is the fearful race between food and population. If we lose that race, our hope for the future will turn to ashes.
At Los Baños, President Johnson took his first look at one of Asia's great experiments, the International Rice Institute.
In its short 4 years of existence, this institute has produced promising new strains of rice yield, which are now being planted in the soil of many countries. One strain developed here has been called the miracle rice. I'm glad to know that the institute is prepared to make these seeds available to all nations, whatever their politics and ideology. Because if we are to win our war, and the only important war that really counts, if we're to win our war against poverty and against disease and against ignorance and against illiteracy and against hungry stomachs, then we have got to succeed in projects like this. And you are pointing the way for all of Asia to follow. And I hope they're looking, I hope they're listening, and I hope they're following. I had to give that to press.
Less than 3 hours after his visit to Los Baños, the president's scheduled tour of the island of Corregidor was suddenly cut short. American ships on the South China Sea were put on alert. The news wires in the city of Saigon went dead, and a covering force of jet fighters slipped in beside Air Force One as she began an unscheduled flight toward mainland Asia. Twilight on a sultry strip of steel runway in South Vietnam.
I came here today for one good reason. Simply because I just could not come to this part of the world and not come to see you. General Westmoreland told me as we were reviewing the troops that no armed forces anywhere at any time were ever commanded by any commander-in-chief that were up to the group that we have in Vietnam now. I give you my pledge. We shall never let you down, nor your fighting comrades, nor the 15 million people of South Vietnam, nor the hundreds of millions of Asians who are counting on us to show here in Vietnam, that aggression doesn't pay and that aggression can't succeed.
On October 27th, President Johnson arrived at the summer residence of Thailand's Premier Kitty Kachorn on the Gulf of Siam.
The same waves that wash Bang Saen and Bangkok also touch Malaysia and South Vietnam and the Philippines. And the waves move out, they wash against South Korea and Australia and New Zealand. And many thousands of miles away, the same Pacific waves touch my own nation. These waves speak of the deepest meanings of my journey. For we have learned again that we are Pacific neighbors with common interests, with a common prosperous destiny.
Nearly everywhere on the Asian mainland, militant communism, poverty, misery, and illiteracy are the grim order of the day. One of the exceptions is Thailand, a kingdom ruled by the great-grandson of Anna's King of Siam, King Pomipon, the world's first monarch to be born in the United States. Within the mile-square Grand Palace compound, the opulent gifts of nationhood and a dynasty of nearly 2 centuries are reinforced by the ever-present belief in Buddhism. In an age when kings and queens are going out of style, Queen Sirikit and her husband have worked as a team to identify themselves with Thailand's progress, its fabled traditions, and its fight against communism. At Bangkok's Chulalongkorn University, President Johnson received an honorary doctor's degree in political science. While he was there, he also signed the International Educational Act of 1966.
Its purpose is to help Americans learn from other nations, and we hope to help other nations learn from America. It is my hope and my firm expectation that as soon as Hanoi accepts reality and the war in Vietnam ends, it will be possible to devote substantially greater funds to the relief of all human need in the world, to the enrichment of life. So I say here in your presence, with all the sincerity I can command, I say to the leaders in Hanoi, let us lay aside our arms and sit down together at the table of reason. Let us begin the work of healing and of teaching and of building and of providing for the children of men. This is the purpose for which we were really made. This is what our age asks us to do.
That was very sweet. And the nicest thing that was a smile that went with it. And thank you all. Thank you, everybody.
On Sunday, October 30th, President Johnson arrived in Kuala Lumpur, the home of the Malaysian Federation and the geopolitical heart of Southeast Asia.
Nowhere in our travels have we found greater expectations than here in your own country of Malaysia. For here, the promises of a new nation are very bright. Here, the accomplishments of orderly and evolutionary development are quite real. Years ago, the city where we spend the night was a city of conflict. You were absorbed in fighting the terrorists. Your streets were filled with soldiers, and your hospitals were filled with the wounded. Malaysia was traveling that difficult road along which one of your great neighbors, South Vietnam, tonight toils with such sacrifice. Yet here today, we have seen the future and what it can hold for a troubled country. We see a bright and thriving and modern capital bursting with energy. We see an inspiring new mosque symbolizing your trust in God. We see a beautiful new museum showing your great respect for a very rich past. We see new buildings and new industries that mark your great economic advance and progress. Three of the world's great peoples have come together here in your nation. They are people who differ in many ways, but who have the will to live together in both peace and harmony and with a sense of nationhood.
On the afternoon of his arrival in Kuala Lumpur, President Johnson helicoptered to the village of LBJ, one of Malaysia's new land development projects, an area that once had been the stronghold of a group of unproductive communist guerrillas.
Impressed the entire world with your determination to close the gap between the rich and the poor of your own nation. You knew the formula was complicated. You knew it required schools and roads and fair prices for the farmer, available credit, chemical fertilizers, the opportunity for farmers to own land, and all of these things together. And you have set about providing them with both imagination and with skill. Malaysia is at peace. And equally important, your nation is reaching outward to its neighbors in a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect.
At the airport, a group of American children reminded him that it was Halloween. The Asian journey was almost over. After the exhilarating visits to Manila, Cam Ranh Bay, Thailand, and Malaysia, it might have seemed that the rest of the trip would be anticlimactic. But as President Johnson headed toward Korea, he had no way of knowing that he would get the tonic he really needed in the country where the words Joon Son mean good guest. In Seoul's City Hall Plaza, 17 miles and 2 million people away from his landing point at Kimpo Airfield, hundreds of young Korean schoolchildren prepared one of the most memorable displays of the president's journey.
President and Ms. Park, Mayor and Mrs. Krim, Prime Minister and Mrs. Chung, ladies and gentlemen. To an American, the free soil of Korea is hallowed ground. "16 years ago, an invading army from the north swept down upon your land. Long and tragic months followed, bringing grief to thousands upon thousands of good Korean families. And in the tide of war, this city was fought over, not once, but several times, and virtually destroyed. Suddenly, on the battlefield, we became allies. In the years that have followed, we have become friends. And now we are partners in a new Pacific community. We know the mettle of the Korean people. We admire their bravery and their self-esteem. We are glad that history and the choice of both our peoples have made us allies and partners and friends. And may that past be only prologue to richer years yet to come.
On November 1st, after visiting the 26th Rock Division at Uijanbu, President Johnson arrived at Camp Stanley, 15 miles south of the Korean demilitarized zone, for a brief stay with the American troops there. At the village of Mun, they would name a hill after him. And past a sea of faces, he would take one last hard look at the verdant promise of an emerging nation. The Odyssey through Southeast Asia was over. The Manila Conference was history, and the American commitment to the non-communist nations of the Pacific had been fully underscored. Perhaps the real impact of his mission would not be properly gauged for months or even years. But to contemporary historians, the meaning was already clear. The journey had marked the beginning of a new era in the Pacific. A new and major benchmark in American foreign policy had been achieved.